Welcome to this special edition of the MIT Energy Initiative Distinguished Colloquium Series. MIT's Energy Initiative is MIT's hub for energy research, education, and outreach, with the mission of linking science, innovation, and policy to transform the world's energy system. My name is Bob Armstrong, and I'm the director of the MIT Energy Initiative. This distinguished colloquium series in energy brings thought leaders in energy to campus, usually physically, but virtually this time in the presence of COVID-19, to engage with the MIT community on timely issues in energy and the associated climate change challenge. This is certainly a perfect time for this particular engagement. Today, we're very pleased to have with us virtually Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, or IEA. He has served as Executive Director of the IEA since September of 2015. And under his leadership, the IEA has undertaken its first comprehensive modernization program since it was created in 1974. The reorganization or modernization has three major pillars. One is opening the doors of the IEA to bring in major emerging countries and economies such as Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, South Africa, and thereby increasing the share of the IEA member countries' global energy demand from about 38% to almost 75%. Secondly, modernization has involved broadening IEA's security mandate from natural gas, to natural gas and electricity, as well as oil. And then thirdly, making the IEA the global hub for clean energy technologies and energy efficiency, which will be part of the theme for today's conversation. So with that brief introduction, let me turn the program over to Dr. Birol to speak about the outlook for global energy and climate trends post-COVID-19. Fatih?
Thank you very much, Professor Armstrong. It's a great honor for me to address the MIT Forum. This is definitely a great privilege for me and for the International Energy Agency. We all know that the MIT is one of the leading universities in the world, and with which IE has a long-standing cooperation in energy and in other areas. And at the IEA, Bob, dear colleagues, we look at all clean energy technologies, ranging from biofuels, advanced biofuels, to carbon capture and storage, from electrochemistry to electrolysis, and also the advanced nuclear reactors. And we know that your program is very much in line with what I just said. You are the leaders of scientific innovation, and we count on you, MIT, and the other leaders in the world. Now, I would like to talk to you about the 2020 a bit and the future. When we look at the year 2020, this has been definitely a grim year. When we look at the coronavirus, the toll on health, it is definitely from United States to Europe, from Europe to Asia, Middle East, everywhere, we see a major impact of health here. And at the same time, economies are also getting a heavy toll. And wherever you look, you see -10, -15, 20 economic decline. But despite this, I see an optimism for the future of the clean energy. And I will try to, in the next 15, 20 minutes, I will try to justify why I am optimistic about clean energy future in this very pessimistic year, the grim year, and also highlight three important challenges that we will be facing in the next years to come. And I would very much appreciate your questions, Bob, as well as the other colleagues. Now, why I am optimistic? First reason is that the renewables, especially solar, the cost of solar is going down and down. And in many parts of the world, solar is the cheapest source of new electricity generation. And when we look at the past few years, we have seen that the solar additions mainly come from China and a bit from the United States, but not is everywhere. From Brazil to Vietnam, from Egypt to Europe, Middle East, everywhere. It is growing very strongly. And not only solar, but also wind, especially offshore wind. As IEA has anticipated last year, in fact, 18 months ago, the cost of wind is also, offshore wind is also coming down. So this is one reason being optimistic. The second reason is when we look at the typical clean energy technologies and their investment, they require the heavy initial investment. The upfront investments are rather high, and in many cases, solar, wind, electric cars, whatever we talk about, the cost of the fuels is almost free. And when we look at the global economy today and the response coming from many governments in terms of central banks, monetary policies, we see low, ultra low interest rates, which can help clean energy technology options investments easier than they are before. The ultra low interest rates may be helpful here. This is a second reason for being optimistic. The third reason, we see more and more governments around the world that are making major commitments to advance clean energy. This can be in terms of the some countries around the world having 2050, 2070 net zero targets, but others have strong clean energy targets to address the air pollution, clean energy. And this is giving a strong momentum. And many countries, in terms of their recovery packages, putting energy policies in place, energy efficiency, renewables, and the others, in order to give an impetus to clean energy. So we are seeing more and more governments are supporting clean energy, not in terms of the programs and targets, but also giving different type of incentives to different clean energy technologies. Fourth, companies. Energy companies are stepping up. Many energy companies are moving and increasing the share of clean energy technologies in their investment and business strategies. And this is driven by at least two factors. One of them is some of them are under the pressure of their citizens, their governments, shareholders, and some of them are also trying to position themselves for the next energy system coming up, so that they are a part of the new energy system in the next years to come, to have a good positioning there. And to be honest with you, I believe the fact that many, for example, oil and gas companies are pushing solar, wind, carbon capture and storage, bioenergy, or hydrogen is very good, because those companies have deep pockets, lot of experience in terms of the managing complex projects, lots of experience in terms of engineering, and I'm sure they will help to mature many technologies they need their help. And in addition to energy companies, several giant technology companies are also pushing the clean energy button. The fifth reason, and the last one, why I am optimistic about the clean energy future, is the innovation is gathering steam. There are many technologies, but if I have to pick up a few of them, for example, the electrolyzers and the batteries are getting a big push, and as a result of that, I wouldn't be surprised that their cost goes down significantly in the next years to come. In my view, electrolyzers and the batteries are there today where solar was some 10 years ago. The same happens to carbon capture and storage. We are seeing there is a growing momentum there. Many countries, United States, the tax credits are really exemplary. In Europe, UK, Norway, Netherlands, and many other applications around the world, and we see lots of investments are close to final investment decisions, and we may see some good progress there too. So putting all of these things together, I believe, at least I personally, I should say, I have enough reasons to be optimistic in terms of our clean energy future. Having said that, I wanted to highlight some challenges which I believe, there are many challenges, of course, I believe which are critical for the clean energy transitions. Three challenges I want to highlight. First, there are still more countries we need to be on board. It is not important to have many countries in terms of the number of countries, but how much of the global emissions those countries represent is very important as well. The same applies to companies as well, energy companies. For example, there is a tremendous pressure on the oil companies, which I have no problem to see that oil and gas companies push the clean energy button. This is very good. But those pressure are focused mainly on the publicly listed companies. And when we look at the share of the publicly listed companies' own emissions in the global emissions, it is about 10%. About 90% escaping the eye of the global attention. So it is important to have a broader view, to have more countries and more companies to be a part of the efforts we have. When we talk about the climate change, I think it is important to think about the different parts of the world. And here, what comes to my mind, many parts of the emerging world is important, but if I have to pick up one part of the world, which is Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, still hundreds of millions of people, almost every second person in Africa doesn't have access to electricity, where we have the highest amount of solar radiation, for example. Can you believe it, Rob? In the entire sub-Saharan Africa, we have 5 gigawatts of installed solar capacity. And in Netherlands, we have also 5 gigawatts of solar capacity, just to put the things in a context. And there is a huge opportunity to bring electricity to sub-Saharan Africa through solar, but not only solar, hydropower, natural gas, among other options. So we shouldn't forget sub-Saharan Africa, especially those countries, many of those countries, as a result of the economic crisis, going through major debt problem nowadays. And the third point, and the last point, what is a big challenge, is one of my favorite subjects. Favorite because not that I like it, mainly because I believe this is a blind spot of the climate debate we have today. When we talk about the energy infrastructure, we are in the political debate, academic debate, we are mainly focusing on the next power plant, next car, next aluminum plant we are going to build, so that we want to pay attention that they are clean and sustainable. But we have a huge existing infrastructure, power plants, iron steel plants, the aluminum, cement factories, which are mainly in developing Asia, which are very, very young and emitting a lot of emissions. And if they were to operate in line with their normal economic lifetime, we have no chance whatsoever to reach our climate goals, even if whatever we build new is completely clean and zero carbon. So how we address the existing infrastructure, especially in emerging countries, especially in developing Asia, ranging from inefficient coal plants to heavy industry, is a major challenge I see today. So these are some thoughts from me to address to you and the colleagues. But I believe one thing is important in order to give a big momentum, and this is what IEA is working on, which is to bring everybody on board. My dream is, Rob, to build a grand coalition of governments, industry, academia, citizens who are genuinely interested, I underline the genuinely interested to address the climate change. In the absence of building such a grand coalition, I think our chances of reaching our climate goals will be rather limited. So these are some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you, and thank you very much once again giving me the opportunity to address, to share my thoughts with you, and looking forward to get your questions and comments. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. That was very optimistic, and I think it's nice to remember optimism in the midst of all the challenges we have in front of us right now. So great to see that and to hear that message. Before I get started on my questions, I had just a comment to make to the audience, and that's to remind them that in the webinar format, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And so I invite you to please submit questions through the Q&A button, and then we will get to those as soon as we can. So while I start off with a couple of my questions here, please start asking your questions on the Q&A facility. So let me start with question about the infrastructure. You talked a little bit about the infrastructure needs and dealing with today's infrastructure, the coal plants that have just been built or recently been built, they have a long lifetime to go. But there's another infrastructure problem, I think, that's a challenge for us, and that's building out the infrastructure we need for more of the new clean energy sources. So as we add lots and lots of solar, do we have enough infrastructure for that? Do we have transmission lines in the right places, for example? As we look to hydrogen, do we have a pipeline infrastructure that's adequate for that? Or maybe you see hydrogen as being more locally sourced. With CCUS, which is another important area, do we have the right infrastructure to deal there. And I think there's some physical issues there. There's also a social issue there, social license to build this infrastructure. And I'd like your sense on how we're doing, we being the global community. I think this grand coalition idea you just articulated is fantastic, because I think we have to learn from each other how to do this and share best practices. But I'd appreciate your thoughts on some of those infrastructure questions, whether they're physical or new build or social license to build capacity.
Thank you, Rob. First of all, the existing infrastructure, just to give you, before coming to the clean infrastructure, what is my problem? My problem is the following. Today, we have about 33, 34 gigaton of CO2 emissions from energy, and about 10 gigaton alone comes from the coal plants, about 1/3. And this is mainly in Asia, and their average age is 11 years old. Whereas in the US or Europe, it is about 42 years old. Okay, so it will be very difficult to go to countries like, I don't know, Bangladesh or India or others to say, shut them down before their investment is paid back. I see it as a big, big, big challenge. And without solving this problem, I don't know how we are going to solve our climate problem. I want to make this point. Just give you an example. Germany, one of the leaders of the fight against climate change in Europe and beyond. I appreciate their program Energiewende. And German government, which is very forward-looking in terms of climate change, wanted to eliminate the phase out the coal. Lots of discussions with the labor unions, with the industry and the others. And after years and years of negotiations, German government decided to phase out the coal plants in the year 2038. So 18 years from now. And this is Germany. Look at the affordability of Germany and compare it with India and the others and the options they have. So it is the reason I believe this is a huge challenge that we have to focus on. Coming to the challenge of infrastructure for the new build. Again, starting with Germany, for example, Germany is one of the leaders of wind energy today, and it is facing, onshore wind is facing a major public opposition, especially in the rural area, to erect wind mills, and hence the push is for the offshore wind now, or finding some ways to compensate the local communities when you build wind plants. We are going to face two major challenges building the new infrastructure. One, the regulatory environment coming from governments, which is more or less learning by doing. We are learning from each other, from the good examples and not so good examples, which includes hydrogen, which includes solar and others. The second one is the raising the investments which are needed to to make those projects viable projects. But it will not be easy. Even the so-called green projects will face social opposition. Here, the leadership, political leadership is very important. And it is the reason I mentioned to have a grand coalition, having a political push around the world, which will be definitely helpful. But once again, we cannot leave everything to the markets. Government leadership is very important to address those infrastructure challenges, both in terms of the regulatory financial, and also social licensing.
Good. Thank you very much. So I mentioned CCUS as one of the technologies that are, I think, important, and certainly IEA just put out a report last week about hydrogen and CCUS as important players in a low carbon future and meeting climate goals. I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that, the CCUS piece generally, and maybe more specifically on direct air capture. Do you see that as playing an important role to get to climate goals? Because we probably won't reach our desired concentration levels, at least in a monotonic way. So your thoughts on those would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Rob. First of all, we look at all the new or rather new clean energy technologies, and in my view, they are all important, but CCUS is very, very critical for the following reason. First, I mentioned to you that we have a lot of infrastructure which is polluting. This is, leave aside the power plants, it is the heavy industry. Cement, iron, steel, aluminum, and others. Retrofitting them with the CCS is, in my view, a way of reducing their emissions and giving them the lifetime that they can have throughout their economic lifetime. This is one. Second, CCS can be important in terms of the new negative emission technologies in connection with the bioenergy, but also direct air capture. So in my view, CCS is a balancing, if I may say so, technology. It can reduce the emissions from the existing plants by retrofitting. It can bring the emissions down. At the same time, it can suck up the emissions, and direct air capture is a very promising technology. I agree that the cost is rather high, very high to date, but there is a lot of potential to bring the cost down. We need negative emission technologies. Hopefully, we don't need as much as our numbers show now, but it is you don't need to be a big, sophisticated modeler. When you look at the numbers, you see that the hard facts are there. We may well need negative emission technologies, and the DAX CCUS can play a very important role here. Why is it very important for us? I should tell you that we are supporting many governments for their policies here. And I can tell you that the US 45Q, the tax credits, is a very good example. In Europe, there is a lot of push from UK to Norway, from Norway to Netherlands, in China, Middle East, and elsewhere. So on 24th of September, we are releasing a special report on CCUS. And in that report, we are going to say that we are now finally seeing a momentum in the CCUS and the investment numbers. You will see the final investment decisions. It is not only the government commitments and statements and PowerPoint slide. This is the final investment decisions, and CCUS is growing, and I see momentum coming there. Is it enough? Not yet, but the momentum is coming, and we have spotted, and we are coming up with a strong message on 24th of September.
So what, continuing on CCUS, what about the countries that are not comfortable with sequestering CO2 locally? So for example, I think in much of Europe, the idea, certainly continental Europe, the idea of sequestering CO2 and injecting that underground is not socially acceptable. some regions don't have the right kind of reservoirs, aquifers, saline aquifers, where you might inject CO2. Do you see that as an insurmountable problem, or are there ways we can deal with that?
Rob, we in our report, forthcoming report, we look at the big amount of countries around the world, especially those where the big chunk of the emissions are coming from, and we have found out very geologically how far is the storage from their emission centers. And as you will see, in most cases, it is within reach, not very far at all. All the countries that do count in terms of the global emissions. But having said that, we have to be objective here, especially in Europe. CCS technology is a difficult sell technology. And this is, in fact, not only for CCS, for many technologies, for nuclear power as well. In my view, one of the challenges we have, in addition to technological challenges, we have a ideological challenge. Everybody loves his or her own technology. So some people favor this one, some other favor that one. And in my view, the issue is not to boost our egos, but to reduce the emissions. So therefore, at the IEA, we look at all the clean energy technologies, and of course, up to governments and the people to choose which one they like. But looking at the numbers, which we do IEA every day, I believe we don't have the luxury to exclude this or that technology because of this or that problem, unfortunately.
So let me put two more questions to you. One related back to the CCS. You mentioned the 45Q in the U.S., which is a subsidy for CCUS, and as you say, I think that's having traction now. A question there is, do we need to get this done more broadly? Do we need a carbon price? And how might we do that globally, or do we need to do it globally? Is it sufficient to do that in some of the large economies or economic blocks around the world? And then secondly, related to your comments just now about focusing on reducing emissions rather than promoting our own favorite ideas, can you comment a little bit on nuclear? I think that falls into that category. Certainly nuclear fission does. There's also nuclear fusion, which seems to be quite interesting these days. A lot of really interesting new technologies coming along there. So your thoughts on either or both of those, please.
Of course. So first of all, on the CCUS, I don't think that the CCUS will be a important technology, will have a increasing market share in the absence of any government support. And this government support can be in many forms. In the United States, it is the 45Q. In Europe, in Norway, there are different way of government subsidies, government supports. We have now a major project, Northern Lights project in Norway. Many companies are supporting, led by the Norwegian government, Norwegian companies. In the absence of those government supports, it will be very difficult. But carbon price would be, of course, excellent. But I don't see, except for Europe today, I don't see a great appetite to put a price on carbon, especially in the emerging part of the world. But they can choose different ways of providing financial support to such projects. And I think that the European example, US example, can give inspiration to those countries. Especially, Rob, I expect that the developing Asian countries here, which talk about China, China has the means to push a technology. And if China is serious about what China says about climate change, and today there was a very encouraging statement from Chinese government about climate change, and I think China would do a big service to the world if they would push the CCS project, which Chinese energy infrastructure would badly benefit from. But once again, if I have to put one country here, being we all need to thank that country for the CCS, it is Norway. The first project, Snapper project, started in Norway and the Northern Lights, and it is the reason I can give you a small secret, Rob, here. When we release our report to the press on 24th, it will be opened by the Norwegian Prime Minister, our press conference by Madame Solberg, as we wanted to honor Norway for the great efforts they are doing to push this extremely critical technology. Now, the other issue is nuclear power. I think nuclear power is a technology that we have no chance whatsoever. We like it, dislike it, hate it, love it, can ignore. Because today it is the second largest source of clean electricity after hydropower in the world. And not only that, when we think of the things what I said in the beginning, share of solar and wind are set to grow very strongly. And their very nature being intermittent, and looking at the ways to integrate them in the power systems in the right way, securing the electricity stability, a key issue here, concept is for me, flexibility of the power systems. And of course, we have different measures to have the integrated solar and wind in the system, such as demand side response, to strengthen the grids or battery storage. But in my view, nuclear, having a base load dispatchability and providing flexibility is critical. And as such, I think countries like United States, in my view, has my personal view, two big tasks. One, the existing nuclear power plants, their lifetime extension, to closing them down at 40, 45 years would be, in my view, losing a major clean source of electricity generation, and could have implications, of course, also for electricity security. So first task, in my view, is lifetime extension. The other one is having a leadership for the advanced nuclear technologies, small modular reactors, because many countries today are facing a challenge to finance nuclear power plants, because when you look at the third generation, it requires huge amount of capital, and it is very difficult to bring that money together. But small modular reactors are easier to finance. The waste management is easier, they are more flexible, and I think US and other countries' leadership here is very, very important. Let me give you one statistics, again, the US and nuclear. Our numbers show that if there are no changes in the US nuclear policy, this or that administration, I don't make any comments, but if there are no changes with the already planned and confirmed nuclear program in China, only in 6 years of time, China will overtake United States as the #1 nuclear power capacity of the world. And this is, I think, important to see two dynamics there. China is building FID for the two nuclear power plants last week, and the US is still struggling to push the nuclear forward. And here, remuneration of the service that the nuclear is providing in terms of the electricity security, flexibility, clean electricity is a critical policy, I believe. So I believe nuclear is very important, and US can play a very important role here.
Good, thank you. So, been a number of questions that have come up from the audience around natural gas and in particular natural gas fracking, which is a major technology play in the U.S. particularly, and in particular around the flaring of methane or methane leaks with that and the impact of those two on the CO2 footprint of or greenhouse gas footprint of fracked natural gas. And some people would like to see us skip over natural gas and just go straight to other clean energy sources. Uh, what do you see as the feasibility of that? Is there a play there for blue hydrogen that might deal with some of those issues? Or do we need to go straight to green hydrogen, or do we need to figure out how to do better at fracking uh, for natural gas as it is? Generally, how do you see natural gas, not just in the U.S., but I think globally, in meeting our climate goals?
So I believe the share of both oil and gas in the global energy mix will decline throughout time. It is what we are seeing. We see the share of clean energy technologies, especially solar and wind, are set to grow substantially. But we will need, if somebody thinks, and I see many angry tweets in the US going left and right that as of tomorrow we don't want any more oil, we don't want any more gas. For us, for me, I love energy, but I dislike emissions. We cannot put these two. I mean, we have to distinguish these two things. Energy is good, emissions are bad. So, and these things will not happen from one day to another. We have to be with pragmatic here. We will need oil and gas for some time to come. And if we go back to what I said in the beginning, the days of coronavirus, let's do not forget that during the days of confinement at home, it was thanks to the oil industry, gas industry, that we could have the sanitizers for our hands from petrochemical industry to clean our hands, or the masks we have today. They are the products of the petrochemical industry. So we cannot, from one day to another, go from one system to another. There will be a transition, but the important thing is to have an orderly transition. But natural gas, if the natural gas producers want to be a part of the clean energy transitions, in my view, they should be. The first and foremost task they have is minimize, if not nullify, venting and flaring of methane emissions. Without doing that, they have no chance whatsoever to be a part of even the immediate future. And this can be done. This can be done. This doesn't need to minimize the venting and flaring, doesn't need to discover a new technology. You just need to have the right measures, and technology is there. You just need to have the fixing this problem. And the companies don't need to be so greedy. They have to put some money in order to minimize the methane emissions and to make the gas less emitting than otherwise be. And also, again, natural gas can be, together with hydrogen, it can also help, again, to be a part of the clean energy future. It is a final solution? No. But we shouldn't forget that we need an orderly transition. It will not be from one day to another. Even though sun rises, it rises slowly, not from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, you have the same sun. We need to see an evolution of that. But we know, IEA knows that the sun will rise, but we have to be patient and follow it very closely.
Here's some more questions from the audience. One deals with energy in Africa. You mentioned the importance of sub-Saharan Africa in particular. And there's a question about major obstacles for installing renewable energy in Africa. particularly in remote areas where there's not much existing infrastructure. More generally, the crises we're facing economically with COVID-19 has aggravated already high debt loads in many countries. How do you see that impacting our ability to finance new energy systems, and particularly in Africa, right, where they're hit hard on all of these fronts? And then lastly, back to some of the renewable, you talked about adding more intermittent renewables, the sun rising slowly in the day. Storage is on a lot of our minds. What are the needs and roles of storage, do you think, in our meeting climate goals? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, Africa. Again, in Africa, when we talk about the African energy situation, I mentioned the electricity. I will come that in a moment. But there is another energy issue in Africa, in my view, which is as important as electricity, which is the energy used for cooking. About 80% of African citizens use agricultural waste, animal waste, or wood in very primitive cook stoves. And this, in turn, creates a lot of respiratory diseases, air pollution, especially women and children. When you look at the statistics, in Africa today, the premature death of women because of the respiratory diseases significantly higher than men, because they are the ones who cook and had to breathe this pollution because of the animal waste, agricultural waste, and others. And I have all the respect and support for the women's rights, but it is not only in Europe and United States in the what we discussed today. In my view, in Africa, this issue is a key part of the gender issue. And when you look at the statistics, it is really very disturbing. So this is one issue, the cooking, having a primitive cooking systems. The second one is electricity. What is very worrying is the Africa has the brightest and the very strongest sunshine receiving part of the world. But at the same time, as I said, the solar installed capacity is very, very limited. Now, just before the coronavirus, we have seen a wave coming, this distributed electricity generation in the rural area. It was growing very strongly because of the declining cost of the solar power. But now what we are seeing, our data shows that there is a pause, if not the reversal trend of getting more people having access through solar energy. Now, what makes me happy, what makes me optimistic, I should say here, is the following. More and more governments in Africa, perhaps I can say for the first time, taking access to electricity as a priority. It was not like that before. They didn't take it as a priority. They are taking it as a priority for different reasons. For some of them understood that this is a way of being re-elected. This is a way of avoiding social unrest. And some governments are really good governments and putting to make their citizens happy, and they know that this is a big barrier for the economic development in those countries. I will just in a second move from Africa to India to give you an example that India, in a very short period of time, brought electricity in almost 4 years of time, brought electricity to hundreds of millions of people because of taking a policy and bringing electricity to hundreds of millions of people. And here, solar also played an important role. Of course, this debt crisis is creating a big challenge, but many governments around the world, I know, and multilateral organizations, we are working with them, with those of World Bank and IMF. In my view, one of the debt issue, how they deal with that, may well be attached to those governments in the context of bringing electricity to their citizens. I believe we may solve, after the global economy rebounds, African economy hopefully rebounds, we may well see this electricity access issue will be part of the history sometime very soon, mainly, once again, solar, hydropower, natural gas. Again, I wanted to highlight it in some parts of the world, and especially in Africa. And therefore, it may well be a part of the history sometime very soon, especially when the economy rebounds, because the solutions are getting cheaper, and there is a growing determination of many African governments, and there are many African governments that can be a good example to others.
Good, thank you very much. So there are a couple of questions related to the coalition that you talked about right at the end of your opening remarks. A lot of interest in that. One of the questions is, appreciate this new coalition you're building. Why not just use the Paris Accord and build on that? Is the IEA working by itself or with others to try to get the US to rejoin the Paris Accord? Are there ways to enforce policies or commitments in the Paris Accord? And last one on this theme is, you mentioned getting citizens as part of this coalition, and there's a lot of interest in how citizens can take part. One particular attendee from Houston is asking about how individuals can bring their own collaborative, innovative, consumer-driven ideas to the table.
So Paris Agreement is a milestone, and this is very important in the history of fighting against climate change. But we know that not all the governments are part of it. And why we need a grand coalition is beyond Paris. We not only need the governments who signed the Paris Agreement, we need the companies, NGOs, citizens, academia, all of them together. And why I am hopeful, on 9th of July, only 2 months ago, IEA, we organized a clean energy summit. I wrote many ministers saying that we would like to discuss clean energy and how to address the climate change. And if you agree and be a part of this debate, how to find a solution, please join us. To my surprise, a good surprise, I can tell you, Rob, that 40 ministers around the world, including the United States, Dan Brouillette, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Chile, all European countries, Chinese minister, Indian minister, South Africa, Japan, all of the 40 ministers came and discussed the clean energy transitions. This is unstoppable. Nobody can stop the clean energy transitions. Impossible. This is we see how the river, very strong river, is flowing. Nobody can stop it. And I am very happy that the many governments around the world, 40 governments, are now ready to push the clean energy transitions. But in addition to that, we have all the major energy companies there, lots of NGOs. We need NGOs to be part of it. Again, the NGOs who are genuinely interested to address the climate change are part of our efforts, and the citizens. I have received thousands of emails from citizens because it was watched, viewed by, you'll be surprised now, Rob, 1.7 million people that around the world. I have many good suggestions from citizens. If your colleague, if the colleague from Houston, if he or she follows me, can write me an email. I will be very happy to look into that. We are happy to push the clean energy technology options, providing guidance, but also try to get building a grand coalition to push the policy part, because without policy, it will not happen. And therefore, it is key, we believe, to build this grand coalition to make the big push for our clean energy battle. Of course, we need brains, and the brains are in the academia. And when I say academia, MIT is definitely a university. We work a lot, we learn a lot. Thank you very much for all the support we got from MIT, from Europe, and from your colleagues. And some of them, you give us the support through your papers, reports. You may not know it, but we follow them very closely. And we are very happy with the MIT Energy Initiative that you are leading today. And I am very thankful to you that, unlike some others, MIT Energy Initiative have an open mind to look at all the clean energy technologies without saying, I don't know if you say it in English, a dogmatic view of the energy picture, but having a pragmatic solutions, bringing pragmatic solutions, not to exclude anything. But thank you very much for all the support.
Well, thank you. And thank you for this very interesting presentation and back and forth in dialogue. I think maybe it's a good theme to end on, with the grand coalition you're putting together, reminding us that it's all of our challenge, right? And we don't get there unless we all work together. And I think the leadership that you exhibit through the IEA is just tremendously important to help inform and organize and move us towards the place we have to go, right? I mean, this is our urgent problem now. So thank you so much for this very informative and enlightening and energetic dialogue, and optimistic, I will say. So sometimes we miss the optimistic part. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again in person at some point. So
hopefully in Paris.
Hopefully in Paris. So stay
so
safe and stay well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you all of you who participated in this webinar.